Thank you, Reverend Eileen, for putting that together. And I have to talk after that. I invite you to close your eyes if you're comfortable. Take in some deep breaths as we continue with the words of that beautiful song and just carry that into our meditation this morning. Breathing in and breathing out and allowing that breath of God to breathe you. We take in those beautiful words of Karen Drucker's song this morning. You are the face of God. Take that in as your truth. I hold you in my heart. Think of all the people that you love, that you want to bless. Just hold them in your heart. You are a part of me because we can never be separate. We are all part of the one. And therefore you are the face of God. You are also the face of love. We hold that love in our hearts for each other. You are my family. We are part of a human family. We're part of a spiritual family. You have your biological family. You have your chosen ones family. You hold them in your heart because each of you are the face of love. Now I invite you to visualize the people that you love, maybe even someone that you're having a challenge with, or someone that's having a challenge in their life, and just in the silence, imagine singing this song to them. In the silence. That love just exudes from our heart space. We feel it expanding with every breath we take, that pink love light of God going out from us to everyone that's sitting around us, to everyone in our community, in our country, in our world, on our planet. We just can imagine it completely surrounded by this love that we feel this morning. I invite you to say to yourself, I am the face of God. Let's say it together. I am the face of God. presence of God, the power of God, the peace of God, the joy of God is all yours as you claim it and know it and believe it and live it. It's a beautiful thing. And for this knowing, for these teachings, we're so very grateful. And so we take that with us this day. I am the face of God. You are the face of God. We are the face of God. Wherever we go, whatever we see, whatever we do, God is in the midst of it. And so we're so very grateful. With hearts filled with gratitude, we say, thank you, indwelling Spirit. Thank you that this is true. We are so grateful. And now I invite you to bring your focus back into the room. And whenever you're ready, just open your beautiful eyes. So usually I talk about the divine feminine on Mother's Day, but I was inspired to talk about the Mother of Unity, Myrtle Fillmore. I had a sort of a quickening with the teachings early on. I was working for the Texas Department on Aging, and I was supposed to be traveling, and I had been to the doctor, and they said I had something on the ovary. They didn't know if it was a mass or a tumor or what it was, but anyway, it was a little freaky, but I remembered Myrtle's story about healing. And so I had the sonogram and did all the testing, but I had to get on this plane and go on this trip, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to see if this stuff works. And I sat on the bed in this hotel. I think maybe I was in some place like Lubbock. I don't even remember where I was. But I just remember that I took the teachings that she taught about talking to the cells in her body and thanking the cells in her body and seeing them whole and well and perfect and being grateful for them and claiming that divine life of God in my body. I did all of those things. And then I came back to Austin, Texas, and the doctor called me. It was like a Friday afternoon late and said, I know you didn't want to wait the whole weekend to find out the results of the test. She said, there's just a little rim there left. So whatever it was, I don't know if it was like a cyst and it disintegrated, but all we can see is a little ridge around the ovary. So there's nothing else that we have to do. And I was like, oh my God, this stuff works. It really works, you know? So that's how I became inspired. And of course, I became very much more into my unity studies at that time when I realized how powerful these words were. So I want to tell you that this month we're talking about how we're inspired. So our theme is I am inspired. So let's say our affirmation together. I am inspired to do all that is mine to do. You know, Myrtle inspires me. She's an inspirational example of how faith and prayer can be. And her teachings, they continue to guide people in their faith and in the healing process. Because you see, when Myrtle was born, she was sickly. She had TB. They told her she had TB. They told her that she had inherited that. And, you know, that stayed that way until 1886 when she actually heard the statement, I'm a child of God and therefore I do not inherit sickness. And that's when everything changed. So in the story of unity that was written by James Dillett Freeman, he states, in 1 hour, Myrtle Fillmore's whole outlook toward herself and her life had been changed like a revelation. This simple and divine idea that she was a beloved child of God, that God's will for her could only be perfect life and wholeness, filled her mind and possessed her being. The old belief that she was an invalid and that she had been born into this family as an invalid was as waters that have passed away. So today I'm going to tell you Myrtle's story. She was born on August the 6th in 1845. She was one of 9 children. And she did have, a lot of health challenges, but she was also known as a dreamer. She was like a funny, peculiar little child. She already had some interesting ideas as a young person. She could feel the omnipresence of God in nature. She loved being in nature, and she rejoiced in that feeling, that connectedness of oneness. Of course, Myrtle grew up and made all those dreams of the silly child come true. But when she was growing up, her parents were very deeply religious and very much ingrained in the Methodist Church. And her father was very strict about that. Her parents both were very strict about that. But they didn't make you join. As the children grew up, they didn't make them join the Methodist Church. And so this is what Myrtle said. She said she found the doctrine unacceptable in her own life and never spoke harshly of it, but in fact remembered the Methodist roots fondly. You see, her dad was a leader in the community, and he was an abolitionist, and he helped with the Underground Railroad to Canada. They were very kind and caring people. And so even later on, Myrtle would talk with fond words about her Methodist upbringings, but she would also talk about things like she believed the earth was going to be alive and humming. They thought she was weird. They thought she was weird. She talked unlike other people as she was growing up. And so I could relate to Myrtle because I too became very much a questioner in catechism in my Lutheran church. I think the minister was really getting tired of me. All right, sunshine, what you got now? Because I questioned everything. And like Myrtle, I just believed that all my friends were going to go to hell because they didn't believe the way we did. It was just weird. It just didn't resonate. So what she did is she said, I took what my soul could accept and I left the rest. And that's what we say in unity. When you take the basics class and you learn about unity, we say you take what resonates, and what doesn't feel right, you just leave it behind. We don't want you to come into something that you don't feel resonates with you. So the love of God was her first love. Her second love was education. She loved education. She was an eager student. Even though some books weren't available to her because she was a girl, she would steal into her brother's room and take those math books, and she would read about math and geometry and trigonometry and just fill herself. There wasn't a book she didn't get her hands on that she didn't read. She was an avid reader and an avid student. In 1867, she had an opportunity to take the literary course for ladies at Oberlin College in Ohio. Now, they wouldn't even allow girls to go to a 4-year college at that time. So this was the best she could do. This is the most, 1 year of college was it. And at the end of that, then they gave her a license as a teacher. And so she was very happy. She got a job in Clinton, Missouri, her first job, and she loved it there, and she was very involved there. But the climate was not so good for her, and the doctor said, you're going to have to find a drier climate. So she went to Texas. She moved to Denison, Texas, of all the places. And she opened a very successful private school. People loved sending their children to her. And so it was so interesting because, you know, Charles Fillmore was way up in Minnesota. He lived up there by, I forget which tribe. Does anybody remember which tribe it was? He lived up in Minnesota close to the Indian reservation. He kind of grew up wild and woolly. She was in this very, you know, upper middle class family, and not Charles at all. He was like the opposite. But as luck would have it, or fate, or divine intervention, however you want to see it, he moved from Minnesota to Denison, Texas, and joined the same literary club that Myrtle was in. And so this is what he said. The very first time he saw her, he heard the words, "There's your wife, Charles." He always thought he chose her, you see. But many years later, Myrtle said to him in all her wisdom, "You know, Charles, the woman always does the choosing. You were splendid, dear, or I wouldn't have chosen you." They became great friends, but then Myrtle ended up leaving and returning back to Clinton, and Charles was heartbroken. So they wrote and they kept in touch, and they continued to develop their relationship, although they were only pen pals at the time. He went off, had all these various jobs. He was trying to make money. He was all about trying to find that, you know, that golden nugget. He was into all sorts of things, and he started to do well in real estate. But he missed Myrtle, and she missed him. And so he wrote her a letter, and he asked, "If when the snow thaws, could I come to you and could we be married? Would you be my wife?" And she wrote back and said, "Yes, I will." And so he made his arrangements, and he traveled to where she was in Clinton. And the ceremony was held March 29th, 1881. And then she had to get with him and go to where he was. I think he was in Gunnison at that time in Colorado. He was digging for gold. He was selling real estate. He was, you know, whatever he could get his hands into. So that lasted for a while. She traveled around with him to these various jobs until that dried up, and then they ended up in Kansas City. So I have the slide of the boys. They were delighted to become parents. The first one, the oldest one in the back, that's Lowell. Lowell was born in 1882. And then Rickard, the one on the right, he was born in 1884. And little Royal didn't come along until 1889. So Lowell, the oldest, he kind of followed after Charles Fillmore and did a lot of teaching and writing and ran the school. Whereas Rickard, the one on the right, he became the architect. He's the one that went to Europe and looked at all the buildings and then came back and brought that beautiful architecture to Unity Village. If you've ever been to Unity Village, you'll see Rickard everywhere because that was all of his design. And Royal, Myrtle worked with Royal more than any of the other two boys. He was her baby, and Royal helped her with Wee Wisdom. They developed the magazine Wee Wisdom. They had a very, very special relationship. Unfortunately, Royal developed all kinds of medical conditions, and he made his transition at age 33, and she was heartbroken. The whole family was heartbroken because they had worked together so closely and developed that magazine that just inspired so many children and families over the years. So the interesting thing is all three of those boys married and had their families living on the grounds of the Unity Farm where their parents were. So it was a really, really close-knit family. So a couple of interesting things I want to tell you about Myrtle is that Myrtle had Rickard do her house with no kitchen. Myrtle didn't like to cook, and she wasn't even going to have the temptation in her house. So luckily, Charles's mother loved to cook. So honestly, you could say that it was Charles's mother that kind of kept that family in sustenance, because in her house that they had also made very close by, she had the kitchen. So she never wanted a kitchen in her house. So I just found that to be fascinating. I also am not a great cook. My husband was the cook, and now my son is the cook. But I totally resonate with that. It's like, oh. So anyway, I just thought that was interesting. Another little tidbit I want to tell you is that I went to Unity Village. I went to Kansas City, where the actual first buildings were in downtown Kansas City before they bought the acreage at Unity Farm, and I got to see that space where Charles would do his sermons. And so Myrtle didn't ever preach, She didn't even really write that much. She wrote mostly to people who were reaching out for help. But she would sit behind him, and they had a big curtain like that because they didn't want anybody to see the lady's knees or ankles or anything like that. So she would sit, and he'd have a long coat on, and he would be going on. He'd be all fired up. He'd be preaching, and it would be getting long and long. So Myrtle would lean up, and she'd yank on his jacket. It's like, time out. I thought that was kind of fun. So anyway, it was the time between 1886 or so. Her health just continued to deteriorate. And then in 1886, when she heard E.B. Weeks and who was trained by Emma Hopkins, when she heard those magic words, that really was the key. That really was what started the whole Unity movement, because she let that truth sink into her. And after being told her whole life that she'd inherited it, it was a really brand new idea that no, she did not inherit sickness. She's a child of God. And so she took that new truth and she grabbed onto it and she used it and she wouldn't let it go. You see what she did, don't you? She changed her mind. She changed her mind and she changed her reality. She said, this is what she said, "The truth came to me, a great revelation, showing me that I am a child of the one whole and perfect mind created to express the radiant health that God is." So that essentially her divine idea was the birth of the Unity movement. And so by the time she was completely healed in 1888, Charles is going, this stuff seems to really be working. So he started paying more attention and doing his own studying. And before you know it, she was writing an article. She wrote How I Found Health. And that thing has gone to thousands and thousands of people have read Myrtle's healing story and how that all worked out for her in her life. And so Charles started using it, and he started healing himself as well. The thing of it was that the word traveled quickly, and people heard that she'd healed herself, and they wanted some of that. And so they started prayer groups. Those prayer groups grew. People wrote. She wrote letters. They started Silent Unity. People wanted Myrtle to pray for them. She wanted some of that magic that she had found. And so it just kept growing. It just kept growing and growing. They traveled. Word traveled quickly, and Myrtle was asked to pray with all kinds of people. They studied under Emma Curtis Hopkins and Mary Baker Eddy. They published the New Modern Thought magazine. And then in 1891, the idea came to Charles that the word unity, because they'd been studying all the world religions and trying to see what are the common threads in all of the world's religions. And that's when they came up with the word unity, which was perfect. And so that's really when everything was born. The name seemed perfect. So word of mouth, they kept growing. They kept needing more space. They kept moving. They kept buying bigger buildings. And the publishing started. It just grew and grew. But the Fillmores never intended to start churches. That was not what they wanted to do. All they wanted to do was to create a space for people of all religious and spiritual backgrounds to be able to come together and learn together and grow spiritually together. They never really wanted to start churches, but you see, they had something so special, everybody wanted a piece of it. And they said, you have to teach us, you have to teach us, you have to. And so they started a school. And the next thing you knew, they're ordaining people, and then churches are starting up, and this is how Unity Worldwide Ministries grew into a worldwide movement. But they never intended it to be that. They had pressure to ordain people. They weren't going to ordain people. But they did that, and it just has been wonderful. So the other love that Myrtle had was of the children. So it was in 1893 that the first issue of Wee Wisdom came out, a magazine for children that was published that she and Royal worked on so carefully. She cared deeply for children, and she believed that we weren't supposed to cram information into children's heads, but that we were actually supposed to bring out the wisdom that was already within the children. And so that's how our youth programs are created now. So I want to take you to Scripture today. We're in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 16 and 17. All Scripture is inspired by God and is useful for teaching, for reproof, for correction, and for training in righteousness, so that everyone who belongs to God may be proficient, equipped for every good work. You see, when Myrtle wrote to those people, she always included scriptures. I was not so much about the Bible until I came into Unity and realized that there is a metaphysical interpretation, that you don't read the Bible literally, but that you use it metaphysically and see what is the underlying message. So when I learned that you could have a problem that you're concerned about, have something that you want to meditate on, you can just let the Bible fall open and you can put your finger on a scripture and you can metaphysically interpret it, and I will guarantee you will be inspired with a message for what it is that you need to do or how you need to see the situation. It's a wonderful, wonderful tool. And so the practical teachings of the Bible are there to guide and to be an incentive for us for right thinking and right living. And that's why Myrtle used it so much in her healing letters. Frances Fox said when she was reading her healing letters, it's like being again in Myrtle's presence and receiving instruction and inspiration from the Christ mind that spoke so freely through her. You see, Myrtle prayed and meditated a lot, and one of the things that she liked to do when she went into her prayer and meditation time, she pictured Jesus sitting right with her in a chair, and she invited him in, right? She invited in that Christ energy, that Christ presence into her time of prayer and meditation. And that's how she said she got answers to help people, all the people that kept reaching out to her and wanting help. Later in her years, a Unity worker said this of Myrtle: Mrs. Fillmore looks and acts like she feels like $1 billion. She seems so sweet and so happy, and that's how she was in her life. Late summer 1931, she walked around to all the offices at Unity Village, all the workers, and she told friends and family that her work here on this earthly planet was basically completed. And she did that in late summer, and then by October the 6th, she transitioned in her sleep. She inspired so many people and continues to do so, and she inspires me. All right, enough preaching, time for a joke. So there's this travel agent, and he's sitting in his office, and he looks up out the window, and he sees this older gentleman and a little bit elderly lady, and they're looking in, they're peering in at all the posters of all the wonderful destinations they could travel to. And he's had a really, really good week, and he's feeling kind of generous. So he goes out and he invites them in. And he says, folks, I know you can't travel very far on a pension, so how about I gift you a trip airline tickets and a 5-star hotel. He said, how does that sound? They said, wonderful. So he takes them over to his secretary, and she tells him to book this particular trip. So about a month later, the little elderly lady comes back in by herself, and she says to him, he said, well, what did you think of your trip? And he said, oh, it was wonderful. The flight was magnificent. The hotel was fabulous. Everything about it was good. But I have one question that's really been bothering me. Who was that old guy I had to share a room with? He didn't even ask if they were married or if they were a couple. Jim, I thought you'd appreciate that. So I told you about Frances Fox, one of the beloved Unity authors. She wrote a dedication in the front of Myrtle's book, Healing Letters. And this is what she wrote about Myrtle in the dedication. She said, by her mothering spirit of love and faith and service in cooperation with her husband Charles, she molded Unity and upheld it during all of its years of growth. So most of, I didn't really know that much about Myrtle's poetry. Most of it was published in We Wisdom over the years, but I want to share one that I found today. I want to share and end with this today. Myrtle says in her poem, if you want the good to grow, watch the little words you sow. If you want life's blossoms rare, pull out thoughts that wear and tear. Loving good is always brought into sight through loving thought. If you want to meet a smile, take one with you all the while. Kind and loving deeds attract, and like the echo, come right back. What we give, we surely get, love for love, and fret for fret. This sweet law, dear Lord, I know, I will reap the good I sow. And so I invite you to be inspired by Myrtle and the Unity movement. God bless you. Thank you so much. I'd like to call the ushers forward now as we move into our time of giving into the good of this sweet community. So whether you sent your gift or whether you've been on Breeze or however you've done it automatically, or if you have your paper check with you, we're going to, however it came in, we are blessing it today with this affirmation. Divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Thank you, God, that this is so.